Welcome to Racism is Real, where we tackle the urgent realities of racism in our society. In this series, we explore the systems of oppression that continue to harm marginalized communities and the movements working to create change. Through powerful conversations with activists, educators, and thought leaders, we aim to uncover the truth and take steps towards justice.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our live podcast. I'm your host, Jasmine Patrick. I am a graduating senior from the esteemed Spelman College here with y'all today. I'm studying English and anthropology, and I'm also from Chicago, Illinois. I want to go ahead and dive into a conversation talking a little bit about housing discrimination and gentrification. We have some community voices here that I would love to introduce. Kenny and Chantel, either of y'all can start with your introductions.
I'm gonna start. Let Chantel arrive as they are. My name is Kenny. I use they them pronouns. I have the immense privilege of serving as the executive director and lead organizer with SC Tenant Union. It is focused on the work of building tenant power and making sure folks know that housing is a human right. And I get to show up in the world in lots of other ways, but tonight I'm gonna focus on that one, and I'm gonna kick it to Shan.
Thanks, Kenny. My name is Chantal. I use they, them pronouns. And I was a former member of the Roots to Justice anti-racism training team and collective, and also the founder and convener of Blackbird Rising, a healing and wellness community centering the thriving of Black, queer, and trans people and the community that loves them. I have a little cat here trying to hang out with me. So if you see her, she's just joining the conversation. And when I heard about this topic about the intersection of housing discrimination and justice and anti-racism or racial justice and equity, I could not think of anybody better to have this dialogue with than Kenny, because I've just learned so much from them in their leadership and the way they show up around housing organizing and showing up for like dignified housing for everybody. So I'm so excited for our conversation this evening.
Thank you. I'm excited as well. As we know, with this current administration, housing developments have definitely changed. It's something that we've been fighting since the Fair Housing Act in the 60s. So to see how it has developed into today's date, and we're still advocating for better for us, it's definitely important for us to continue these dialogues. But I want to start with a question for you all, kind of getting more into your perspectives on how community shows up, and what the climate currently looks like. Can you share a story from your community that shows how current developments or gentrification mirrors historical housing discrimination, and what that reveals about who gets to stay and who is pushed out?
Yeah. So I live in North Charleston. So most folks don't know where Charleston, South Carolina is or have heard about it. And I live in a community that's just north of Charleston. It's actually like the lineage is that people who were once on the peninsula of Charleston were pushed out or development sprawled out. And North Charleston is known as like a predominantly Black community. I live on one of our major thoroughfares, and you can just see the path of gentrification. Like you can see where folks have decided to invest and to develop, and it's it's beautiful because to live in this community and be connected with Black elders and things of that nature. But it's also hard because so many of them actually have a story of living and growing up on the peninsula, and I think like to see what some people think is like great development, like access to restaurants and fancier apartments and things, but to also realize what that actually means is often permanent displacement. So there are people who live here whose families will never live here again, but who before that were here for generations. And it it is painful to live in that reality, but it is a story like that I get to help with the rewriting currently in the work that I do.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, I'm sure Kenny has like 8 million stories. My story is a little bit more, I don't want to say it's more personal because I think all these stories around housing is personal. Um, I was thinking about this conversation today, and thinking about my own housing experience. And um, when they say something is desirable, or when it's marked as a community is marked as desirable for those in power, often developers, wealthy white developers who want to make it um, more safe for white purchasers and owners. Um, the language about how they talk about a place changes. Like, they rename neighborhoods and they rezone what is desirable community or not. And I used to own a cafe in a neighborhood called Kensington, which was a historic Puerto Rican neighborhood in Philadelphia, Puerto Rican and Black neighborhood. And I remember the day that a white like property owner that actually lived in New York came into the cafe and was like, yeah, I'm just so excited about all things that's happening in East Kensington, right? So now it was no longer Kensington. Now we have to say there's Kensington and East Kensington, which is East Kensington is to mark how much more is desirable by white um, homeowners, landowners. And she was like, yeah, it's so much nicer here. I've come down from New York and I own several properties. And she said, it's almost safe enough for me to live here now. And so she was saying that to me as to be like, aren't you so happy as a business owner that to see this move? And I was like, yeah, actually, no, I'm really sad about that because of like watching the way the neighborhood and the customers that come in and the kind of community that can no longer afford to live um, in a neighborhood that they historically have lived in just because somebody else has marked it as desirable. And so I think she felt like as a business owner, I'd be like, yeah. And I was like, no. And what about how I'm owning my business makes you think that I commiserate with you about that? But yeah, just thinking about desirability in housing and how it shifts what is considered a place that people want to be in and not be in, and how predatory that can be. So that's my story. Is that my story? That's my story.
No, that was great. Honestly, it was very engaging. It makes me think being downtown Atlanta, seeing the white Georgia Tech students going jogging, and I'm like, oh, it's coming. And
Mm-hmm.
a large part of this conversation that's often forgotten is that it's not just about home ownership; it's about home building. So when we're shifting away from the fact that people's homes are being uprooted, people's whole entire livelihoods are being changed into something that they have been developing for years, that's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily looked at as deeply as it should be. But
Mm-hmm.
I want us to transition a bit more deeper into this conversation, because I know you were talking about your coffee shop based on what you are observing locally, and from past strategies, what community-led approaches or policies do y'all think show real promise in fostering neighborhood growth while protecting long-standing residents, and how can they be scaled or adapted?
I'm gonna see this conversation, the question to Kenny.
Get my attention.
I'm, I'm gonna see it to the professional, as it were. Go ahead, Kenny.
So, of course, I'm gonna start with tenant unions. I think that tenant unions, I think sometimes are a little. I'm in the South, so people get a little nervous about the language of union, but there's a lot of possibility when the people that live there come together and figure out solutions for themselves, or are very clear about what a solution for themselves is. And so tenant unions make me think about tenant like community associations and what it actually was like when people talked to their neighbors. So I think like part of like our challenge right now as we like think about like keeping people housed and keeping people in communities is like keeping them connected to one another, even across difference in reality. Like, we are living in the times of like corporate landlords, and so you should know the people who actually live next to you and if they own their home, and knowing those intricacies actually creates some like synergy of like you can tell people what's about to come or what's coming down the pipe. um I think one of the other things that we're seeing across like nationally is people talking about this language of housing first. And that means figuring out where to put those houses or where to put those transitional spaces. And those are spaces that's how we see success in our communities. Like people, when people don't have to worry about where they live, they show up as a completely different human being. Try being displaced, even if you have never experienced any displacement. If you've moved, gone through the trauma that is moving, having to pack up all of your belongings, live out of boxes, like that changes people. And so, like, I'm thinking about those spaces and the spaces in which we see actual community input, like when a developer comes in and they have a community benefits agreement, and the community, people that live there, come back and say, actually, we need more money for our schools. We need you to put a rent cap in place so that people are not pushed out. We need those things. So we're always thinking like community-based solutions in which the people that are closest to a problem get to tell us the solution, because they know, like, you know what you need. And that's like, those are really big pieces, but also thinking through what does it mean for a lot of us to move even our ethos around our thinking from, we want people just to be housed, to like, housing is just a human right. And so we're taking the commodification actually off the table as a standard rule, and seeing how that actually frees up your community to show up. We see that success in like small micro plants that are happening across the country in different cities, as they think about what it means to make sure folks are housed and universal basic income. And the proliferation of that is like when we'll get to actually see some changes in our community that are not just about like how people are housed, but are how people are able to show up. Chantel gets to do a lot of work around in the spirit, this realm of like spirit and healing and taking care of that part of who we are. And some people can't even get to that part of access. Like, that's not even accessible to people until they're housed. And so community solutions where folks are at the forefront um, make a lot of sense, and where folks understand them, because also people are throwing things out for people to try or to do, and the community doesn't understand. So almost anything could work a little bit better than what's happening in capitalism if the people actually were taken alongside on the journey versus like thrown into an experience.
I resonate with so much of what you said. I was thinking about um, how a lot of times people prioritize, there's like this hierarchy around if you own your house or if you're in a mortgage with a house, because really, when do you truly own it in capitalism? And what does it mean even to own something on stolen land? So there's all these complications, but thinking about how so many of our communities, where Black and Brown communities, are renters, and it's kind of like people are not, it's like that kind of housing is not as legitimate as if you're a homeowner. And yet so majority of us are tenants and are living in housing that we lived in for a long time as a long-term resident, but are in fact renters. And that should not be seen as any less of a meaningful housing situation or community than people who quote unquote own their homes. And so I'm just thinking about, like, as a person who owns a property that has a tenant, several tenants, and which is a privilege. And I owned this property while I myself was a tenant. Like, I was a renter who owned a property with renters, and how much more empathy I had and responsiveness to my tenants when something happened in their property, and how much more accessible I am to my tenants, because I know what it's like to have, I was living in the shared experience of being a tenant, and feeling like, what are your really rights and what are your recourses for making sure that you have dignified housing. And so now that I have the privilege of just recently becoming a homeowner, quote unquote homeowner, having a mortgage with a mortgage company, I think a lot about there's actually seems like I feel more isolated as a homeowner than I did as a renter. Like, it was a renter. I feel like that was in some kind of community where there was some kind of access to support. And now as a homeowner, I'm kind of like left on my own. And many Black and Brown homeowners may be first-time owners and don't even know what it means to own a property. And so there's not even like, that's why developers can come in and offer you a big amount of money, I think, and be like, you're like, $, let me get out of this house, because we're not really educated or supported when we do take on a mortgage or a home. And so I think there's so much bifurcation around these are legitimate property or housing needs around keeping people in properties they own or are mortgaged in versus renters. And I think there's like, we need to have more global conversations with each other about what does it mean to have dignified housing, what does it mean to have support and community in housing, and that one thing is not more legitimate than the other. People
Yeah.
need housing,
People need
period.
housing. And the language that you're using like is real. Like in my work, we call it a bank. You're just a bank tenant. Like tenants are people who do not have full control over their housing. And that is not very many people in the world at all. And once we all get to the place of understanding that we have far more in common around that, with that we're all quite in precarious situations, as it were, under capitalism, that's the thing that opens it up for all of us.
I see there's something about a question. What do you think, Jasmine?
Yes, let me see about these questions. We have one so far, that says, I love how you say housing is a human right. Can you elaborate on that? And how can you protect it in this right?
Yeah. So to live and to breathe and to be human means that you should have access to certain things. Um, so you should have access to water, to shelter, to food, and to peace. Actually, like there are whole schools of thought when we think about like the Human Bill of Rights. Like you could write Google that reality, and so right now we know that like that's not necessarily a legal right in the place that we live to have housing, but it is like really an inalienable right. Like people should always have access to those things. That's part of like actually what makes us human. And so it's really important for us when we start talking about housing and affordable housing and what's just, to keep pulling people back to humans should have a place to lay their head and have shelter and safety. And when we start there, the conversation is radically different versus what people could earn themselves into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That part, I think the part about like, are you worthy? Have you done enough to earn this thing? And then how it lets us off the hook. We think it lets us off the hook collectively if somebody hasn't done certain steps to what we feel like um it makes them deserving of housing. And I think about how we even engage nature. Like we displace all kinds of ecosystems. Be and you know, some foxes don't have a hole to lay, no dam to lay themselves down, and then we wonder why things are so out of order. And I think like we very much treat displacement as a matter of course. It's part of the of progressing, and it's part of the, you know, becoming better. Is of course people are going to be displaced, or nature is going to be displaced, and that's just part of the price of progress. And I think that that has been, obviously we see the repercussions of that, how violent that has been in disrupting families and putting people in very precarious positions.
Yeah. And you said it right. Violence. Like it's not a natural occurring phenomenon. Hurricanes, natural, flood, yes. Tearing down a whole apartment building and no care, no plan where somebody else goes. That's not a natural occurring thing. Those are choices. Like
Mhm.
one of the language that a lot of folks that are involved in housing justice, you'll hear us talk about is like housing first, which means like before we deal with anything that has to do with a human, we're gonna get them housed, and then we can, once they're housed, we can start. If there's drug addiction, if they need a job, we can sort those things afterwards, and then that houselessness, eviction, like high rent, those are all policy choices. Like somebody chose
Mhm.
that's acceptable and okay for like human beings, and that's not it. Like I just
Yeah,
that's
like
it's just
if we can choose what we want to choose, then why are we choosing that? And I think like one of the questions in the comments, like how do we protect these rights? And I think it's like going back to like, how do we really talk about what it means to practice community safety and care, and like really honoring the dignity of every human being and valuing every human life. But when we live in a disposable society, I think people get to feel like they don't have to worry about so and so as long as they're covered. And don't realize how close we all are to being unhoused. Like it's very precarious. It's really precarious system. So anyways, I don't know, Jasmine, if you got another question for us. Me and Kenny could go off.
I can see that, and I love it because I think it's definitely a conversation that needs to be had. I can even speak personally. I live in an apartment downtown, and you could see from my window the Atlanta Mission. So you could see families coming in and out, and you could definitely tell there are some people in my apartment complex who avoid that area entirely. That's considered the bad part of town, but it's across the street. So again, it's like this sense of the haves and has not. Like, you either got it by luck, and it's this mentality that I think is rooted in capitalist thinking, where people think that, well, I just got it because it's in me. But it says if you read your lease, you could be gone the next day.
Sis, if they give you them 30 days,
no grace.
Where will you go?
No grace.
Where will you go? And governments can, and in mortgages, they can just take your house too. Like, they're like, nah, what is that eminent domain where they can decide that your property, they need it more than you do? The whole thing is a shell game. And I was thinking about like caste systems, and like how in our caste system, in our society, not only is it racialized because of class, there is these untouchables, which I think are the people who are unhoused. They are our untouchables. Like, we don't want to see them. We don't want to, and we believe that they deserve to be where they are. Unless you're like a child. And even then it's like, well, wish you got better parents. Yeah. What can we do? But those are, I do think people who are unhoused are our untouchables that we feel like is, nobody wants to be associated with them. Nobody wants to be them, but we also feel like they have done something that has put them in that position. And so it's just like it's a shell game. The whole thing is a game.
It's definitely a game. And you're right in that, like, Jasmine, you're down in Atlanta. This stuff is all tied up together. People don't want to look at the mission, don't want to see people that are houseless, but are okay with like a cop city being built, which also displaced thousands of people. Like, we gotta get real about the things that we stand up against or stand for, or how those things all interplay together. Like, we have created a caste system in our country. Like, we manufactured the untouchable because the landlord's allowed to jump your rent as much as they want to year over year. We got unstable housing markets where the percentage, your interest rate was this, but then you signed a loan where it can balloon. Like, there are all these things like we create and are okay with. Chantel and I have like this human that's been in and out of our orbit that we often talk about, like, in this way of like, what does it mean that our community has not housed this person? Like, we know this person to be good and to be worthy, and all people are worthy, but like, we know them. And there are people that are closer to them that know them, and yet like there's these, and I'm like, I want to be real, like, we can't house everybody in our own homes, like, right? Like, your landlord gonna put you out, then everybody out. Like, there are ways in which, like,
it has been done. It historically has been done. People have been putting the people in the house. That's what you got to do sometimes.
That's what I mean. It's like, it's like, but we also have to make the choice to do it. Like, and we also have to like commit to doing it together. And I think there's a lot of, like, you were talking earlier just about like how disconnected we are from one another, which makes it hard. And also, I think the other thing that makes this current housing that we're sitting is like this lack of imagination. We have been taught that the American dream is a thing. And so people are like, this is the thing that people aspire to. But what would happen if we all got to sit down and erase the American dream and really just be like, what is it? What do we want for one another? Like, what is our vision? What do we hope for one another? And until we get to that space of being able to really get in the bag and play and color and think outside of what has been, we're going to continually have a cast that's untouchable or is disposable. There are people that I love and care about that are houseless, and houseless, and also on the verge of having a lease, like approved for some place to live, but no one's moving fast enough for them to actually get into their space. So it's like we just need a lot of more imagination and space to dream of different realities than the one that we currently are living in.
But I also think that we have to have a society that wants to dream that way. It always goes to that one study where the professor's like, I'll give everybody an A in a class if you all agree to it. And there's that one person who's like, well, I worked so hard, I should be able to take the test, and everybody shouldn't have an A. I think it goes back to that study. There's always going to be that one group of people, and we know who they are, who believe that, well, I've worked so hard, I've worked my behind off, that I'm entitled to have this, even if not.
Yeah.
And it's dependent on that somebody is not. And that's the issue.
Yeah.
But I want to talk a little bit more about long-term or long-time residents and the displacement that we've seen. I do want to even touch a little bit on the situation in DC, because we saw a lot of people who were long-time residents being displaced just because Trump didn't want to see, he wanted his wife back, and he knew Melania was going to come back in that situation. Whatever. I don't know what happened, but just seeing how these people are being displaced in their own homes, in their own cities, from social, cultural, and economic pressures. How does that connect to the deeper history of housing inequality?
I mean, I live near the port. That a huge majority of like folks that have heritage connected to enslaved Africans are it is. And so there are still living structures where folks that were enslaved lived here, or the remnant of like what was Reconstruction, people getting some housing and being able to keep it. And like that is the history of housing inequity, like in this country, is that there have always been folks that have been given a lesser thing. And I live in what is called the belly of the beast. It is a different kind of, like, I've lived lots of places. Living in South Carolina and witnessing housing inequality is a different beast. I feel like the ancestors be shaking the ground. And I mean, and I'm talking about ancestors on both sides of a reality, shaking the ground to like keep people tied to a thing that is not well, like, and not good for them.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I saw in the chat there was a question around like, how do we push back against gentrification? And I'm just thinking about like gentrification is like the new face and the new name of a really old system, like you said, built on keeping people in a certain place by making sure that they expect and know that they can only aspire to certain kinds of level of housing and certain kind of safety around like where they lay their heads at night. And especially if you can force people into a certain area or push people out of a certain area, then you can concentrate wealth and investment in those areas, or divest and to keep cycles going. And so I think this is our story of housing. Like this is our ongoing story of housing, and the latest face of it is gentrification. But not too long ago, or still maybe, it was redlining. The house I live in right now is a house that I'm in because it was a redlined house. And as part of like making things amend, being mandated by the federal government to make this right, the mortgage company had to like help people get into redlined houses. And so it's the tale as old as time, my dears. This is as American as you can be, making sure people don't have access to safe and dignified housing, and to decide that when you want something, you can just take it, and make conditions be so intolerable that people have to leave or are coerced into giving over what they have because they're not given the support or resources to stay where they are, or systematically pushed out, right? So it is the American way, and I do think that it's going to take a revolution, like it always has, for us to right historical wrongs. Yeah.
A
They have to
revolution.
a revolution. Give me
Listen,
the revolution.
and we've like,
Um,
and it's we've seen it too. Like there have been remnants of it in our
yeah,
lifetime, like in our parents' lifetime. Like I am one generation removed from segregation. Not like I'm the first generation of my family to go to schools that were not segregated.
right.
And like there's some reality that I have to live in and navigate through that space. And like my primary life work right now is reminding people that the revolution actually is possible. And it starts with us talking to our neighbors and like committing to build a thing. Because Jasmine, I think you're right. There will always be a holdout, and yet, if everyone else was to actually come together, in the study you couldn't bop nobody out or couldn't box nobody out or can make them be quiet. But in this here United like in this here land that I'm living in now, if all my neighbors in Charleston or in South Carolina, if the tenants were to rise up, those who don't have control over their housing, together in lockstep, it'd be a different reality. Now, it take a journey to get to lockstep, but I know that like I've seen many versions of that where in my lifetime I have a peer who's had lost their family housing, like family land, and we raised the money for them to regain that land together.
Yeah,
And so it's like we start small, we go big. Like we the tenant union meetings, they be rough, y'all, and rowdy. To start, a couple neighbors coming together, and then we build until like we can hold the landlord accountable
yeah,
or we can hold the city accountable. But it is a constant work and a commitment that requires a lot of us doing stuff we've never done before.
yeah. Can't say it better.
I will even say, as someone who grew up in a community, in a neighborhood where it was very much, I have so much that you have it now. Like all of my extra groceries, produce, anything that comes from my garden is now yours.
Mhm.
Um, Being in Atlanta, and specifically my complex, it's not any of that. Like like
Mhm.
like I do want to kind of talk about it because I think that's kind of the foundation, that we don't have that neighborly bonding anymore. We don't have those conversations anymore. And then don't even let the taboo conversation come up of, oh wait, what's your rent? You mind sharing your rent? Because then everybody starts to be clutching their pearls like it's something sacred that they have to hold on to. And it's really not. It's about being transparent and not just honest, because when we're transparent we get to see the entirety of a thing. We get to see the holistic
Mhm.
nature of this issue, but instead we're seeing things at face value. And I think that's what the larger issue is of this conversation, that we're just seeing it in black and white. And I'm not just talking about black and white, and metaphorically, but literally black and white. um and we see these black and brown people advocating for themselves, and there are people who are like, well, for what? You have all these rights now. What's the
Yeah.
issue? Just work as hard as me now. As if systemic racism is not a thing. Like it's not a actual obstruction built into the fabric of this country.
Yes, exactly.
Say,
The
say that.
fantasy, the fantasy. I do think that like I'm thinking about all of the places in which I've been able to lay my head and have shelter. And every last one of them has been actually a community project. It has been in community connecting me to opportunities that I didn't know about, or community pulling money together and helping with down payments, or every last property that I've owned or have lived in, even as a tenant, has been through a community connection. And so I think there is this kind of, maybe it's not the standard practice as much anymore, but it's not gone. It is still there. And I think it's all of us remembering what capitalism and white supremacy wants us to forget, and what Kenny's pointing to, in that our power and our safety is in each other. Like, and the only people who are, I think whenever I feel resistance to being transparent, I have to ask myself, who benefits the most from me being quiet about this? Who benefits the most from my silence? And usually it's the people in power. So when people don't want you to be transparent about how much I pay versus how much you pay, or this is how much we're increasing the rent on things versus how much they choose to increase the rent on somebody else, it's it's a tactic deployed to keep people in their place. And so when we can, I think people get scared to share because they think that if I share, what I have will get taken away. But what I've noticed is when I share, everybody gets more. And so, that's a commitment. That's an experiment you have to be committed to practicing and be committed to living through the times when that doesn't work out as well as you want it to. So that's my thoughts on, like, we are still practicing community care and support around housing. I think it's just really quiet. And sometimes people are scared to talk about it more because they're scared that if you bring attention to it, people in power will do what they always do, which is try to disrupt movements of power building.
Oh yeah, that's it, Shan. That's it, Jasmine. Like the real commitment of folks that want to walk into housing justice, you want to lean deeper into stopping gentrification, is like to participate in the experiment that is community, and to be honest, and to like learn your neighbors, like learn them. And when we do that, like there is some magic. And Chantel, I grew up in housing that was provided by the church. So like I am like I was born in a Methodist hospital. I was in some houses that Methodist folks owned through all till I was an adult. And actually beyond. And that project like is like how you got Kenny.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you all for engaging in this dialogue with me. I think this was a necessary conversation. And as heavy as it was, I think it was also refreshing because everybody's rent is going up like crazy. I know it's a time where this is prime move-in time for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And it, I think, puts fresh eyes on a situation that I think we're normalizing. Going back to some points made by our fabulous, so intelligent, well-spoken speakers here,
Okay, Jasmine.
that this is a communal issue, and that this is something that we should not tolerate and cannot tolerate.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we're going to continue to see the benefactors of gentrification breed new issues into our community.
Yep.
And I think seeing everyone's personal stories and knowing that this is a personal thing.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I learned about this year, it's okay to take some things personal.
Mm-hmm.
So seeing this issue as something that is inherent to me and mine and you and yours is what allows to streamline a solution to this issue. But I just want to thank everyone for coming out and listening today. Thank you for your time. This has been one of the best panels that I've gotten to host. So thank you to this was a great experience for me, and I hope the best for everyone this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine. I appreciate your hosting, and people can reach out and connect with me on Instagram at Blackbird Rising or on our website, blackbirdrisinghealing.com. If you want to learn more about healing in community and also like how we can show up and build safer community practices with each other. And I don't know, Kenny, if you want to share how people can support the work of the Tenant Union.
Yeah. If you want to learn more about this collective work that I'm a part of called SC Tenant Union, you can check out sctenantunion.org. We're also SC Tenant Union on IG and on Facebook. And Jasmine, you were saying something about the rent being high. If you go to the website and you click the store, you'll see some t-shirts that are pretty incredible and I wear all the time and get stopped that say a little something about the rent being a little too high, and about some of the other foolishness that our landlords ask us to sign on to. So grateful to have been with you all to chat and like to be grounded back into why I do this work.
Ashe, ashe.
Okay, thank y'all.
Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, Kenny.
Bye.
That's all for today's conversation on Racism is Real. Thank you to our incredible guests for sharing their insights, and thank you for tuning in. Remember, awareness is the first step, but action is where the change happens. If you found today's discussion valuable, this series will return every second Tuesday evening. Also, be sure to check out our website and follow us for more information and topics like these. And consider making a donation to support our work. Together, we can challenge systems of oppression and work toward a more just future. See you next time.